Hi there, everybody. This is Chris Newmarker. I'm editor-in-chief of Medical Design and Outsourcing and Mass Device. Uh, we're joined here with experts from Elevaris Medical Devices today. We're going to be discussing engineering precision, the best practices in laser cut tube and microcomponent design for next-gen medical devices. I mean, these are really exciting times right now in the surgical device space. We have surgical robotics is an extremely hot space. We have many other minimally invasive systems running, rolling out onto the market. But that also means that we need tighter tolerances and more complex geometries for those types of devices. So this is going to be a really useful talk that we're going to have today with Elevaris. Just a little bit of housekeeping tools. You can, there's resources that can be downloaded in the resource widget on here. You can submit questions in the Ask Question widget, and you can expand the slides with the icon in the top right corner of the slide widget. There's a little bit about troubleshooting here. The little curvy line with the arrow, that's going to refresh your browser, and that should solve most of the issues if you're getting hung up with listening to this webinar right now. Try closing other apps and browser tabs. Click help in the top menu for troubleshooting steps, and you can also ask for help via the Ask Question widget. And just again, this webinar is sponsored by Elevaris Medical Devices. Now I'm gonna turn things over to our presenters, Tom Graham and Valor Thomas. Welcome to MDO.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess we can kick things off with a quick round of introductions. My name is Valor Thomas, and I am the Director of Business Development for Elevaris Medical Devices. I spent the better part of the last 16 years in the CDMO industry, focusing on medtech development, working with engineering teams to bring innovative solutions to market. And I'm happy to be joining with you guys today and excited about today's discussion. Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Graham. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Elevaris Medical Devices. I'm an engineer. By profession, I've been in medical devices for the last 30 years, both in a design and manufacturing capacity.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for everyone joining us today. We're excited to discuss this topic around laser cut tube and micro component design, best practices for next generation medical devices. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off with a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll start with the big picture, with the conversation around the evolution of medical devices, and specifically how precision components have impacted that evolution. I will then introduce to you Elevaris Medical Devices, which is a relatively new brand in the medtech space, but it's a brand that's backed by extensive expertise and a track record of excellence in medtech manufacturing. From there, we'll talk about some of the design challenges we're seeing in next generation medical device development. And then we'll move into a conversation around some of the best practices in micro component design. We'll also include a real world case study that ties these concepts together and brings them to life. And then we'll wrap things up with a live Q&A session. So let me encourage each of you to drop your questions in the chat at any time during today's presentation. I will gather them, and Tom and myself will do our best to answer as many as possible at the conclusion of our prepared remarks. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in by taking a look at the big picture. How have medical devices evolved over time? The reality is that medical devices have come a long way from their origins as simple single function tools. What was once a manual instrument or a passive delivery mechanism is now a highly engineered, specialty-specific technology. In many instances, these emerging technologies are unlocking entirely new standards of patient care. Today's medical devices, they're smarter, they're smaller, and they're more functional than ever before. So whether it's navigating tortuous vasculature or sensing physiological feedback in real time, or delivering targeted therapy, modern medical devices are just expected to do more. and they're expected to do more with greater precision and while taking up less space. This evolution is happening all across the clinical domain. In cardiology, for example, balloon catheters have evolved into complex transcatheter valve systems with laser cut stents and torqueable delivery shafts. In pain management, what was once a simple spinal needle is now a guided radiofrequency system with echogenic dimpling and conductive surfaces. And in general surgery, traditional surgical tools and methodologies have given way to advanced robotic systems that are leveraging multi-jointed laser cut instrument shafts that are designed for articulation, control, and precision. So as devices have evolved into more specialized and complex systems, the performance of the individual components has become that much more critical. And in many cases, it's the precision components that are enabling the functionality, the control, and the reliability that these modern medical systems demand. This is especially true in specialties like endoscopy, oncology, and neurovascular interventions. In endoscopy and minimally invasive surgery, precision components like flexible multi-lumen shafts and micro-machine housings are enabling systems to navigate complex anatomy while integrating imaging and illumination and therapeutic functionality into a single platform. In neurovascular applications, ultra-flexible hypotubes and micro-cut components are essential for enabling devices to steer within the complex structures of the human brain with extreme accuracy and reliability. And in oncology and biopsy devices, sharp-tipped access tools, bonded subassemblies, and integrated sampling mechanisms are providing clinicians with the precision and control needed both for diagnoses and targeted treatment. Across these specialties, the demand for smaller, more integrated and higher performing components continues to grow. And meeting that demand at the required speed and scale is exactly where Elevaris adds value as a strategic CDMO partner. Elevaris is the result of a fusion of capabilities, if you will, from two trusted names in medtech manufacturing: Spectra Medical Devices and Excel Precision Technology. So although Elevaris is a relatively new brand in the medtech space, it's a brand that's built on a legacy of innovation that spans more than 3 decades. And it's that legacy that shapes how we approach every project and how we support our customers in bringing complex devices to market. Our expertise lies in the design, the development, and the manufacturing of metals-based precision components for medtech applications. You know, this focus means that we understand the requirements and demands that modern day precision components require. But our value isn't just in the parts that we make, but also in how we make them. And that's where our vertically integrated capabilities equips us to solve some of the most complex challenges in device manufacturing. When it comes to precision manufacturing, laser technology, micro machining, and precision grinding is where Elevaris leads with both depth of expertise and the ingenuity required to transform challenging concepts into production-ready components. Of course, having these capabilities is only part of the equation. What we've seen is the best results come from when engineering teams align their design decisions with the key principles of manufacturability right from the start. You know, these principles are intended to help engineers avoid delays and costly redesigns and downstream production issues. So the first principle we have here is design with process capabilities in mind. In other words, match your tolerances, your geometries, and your features to what the actual manufacturing processes can reliably deliver. We love to push the boundaries of what's possible in medtech manufacturing, but even in the midst of innovation, keeping process capabilities top of mind is of the utmost importance. Next, minimize over-engineering. We've all seen those designs that look great on paper, but add complexity without improving performance. That extra complexity can drive up your cost. It can slow down your prototyping, and it can make scaling more difficult than it needs to be. Third, account for material behavior. Metals, polymers, and composites, they all respond differently to cutting, bonding, forming, especially at the micro scale. So if you don't consider that up front, it can cause problems later. Next, prioritize stack-up control. Even small dimensional variations across multiple parts or processes can add up really quickly. So if you don't manage those tolerances right from the start, you can end up with subassemblies that just don't fit or function as intended. And then there's simplifying, fixturing, and handling. And I know this sounds obvious, but I think that's the key reason why it's commonly overlooked. If a part is difficult to hold or move or orient during production, that adds risk and can impact your costs. This is especially true when we're dealing with incredibly small parts. So designing for easy handling can save a lot of downstream headaches. And then finally, design for inspection and validation. It's not enough to simply make a part, but you have to be able to measure and verify that that part meets the requirements and the functional specification. That means leaving physical space in the design for metrology, imaging, and functional testing. These principles are even more important today because modern medical devices are facing a new and evolving design and manufacturing challenges. So perhaps here I can yield the floor to Tom, and Tom, you can take us through some insights into some of the challenges that we're seeing in modern medical device design.
Okay, thank you, Vala. I think you've gone through some of the topics quite well there, Vala. So what we want to try and do is give some real examples and dig into each of these topics a little bit deeper. So I think, first of all, miniaturization and tight tolerances. I think everybody is aware that devices are getting smaller and the challenges of manufacturing are getting more difficult. But now we're looking at laser cut tubes with outside diameters of 0.3 millimeters, so 12 thou diameter to work with, and then going up to the other side of the scale where we've got an inch, 25 millimeters diameter. We're looking at wall thicknesses below 50 microns in thickness. Kerf widths, the lasers that we are using, they're now starting to get smaller and smaller in terms of the capability of the features and the size of the cut that they can use. The features we're cutting are 50 microns in scale. So as we challenge the requirements of the devices with new manufacturing techniques, those two things have to go hand in hand. But dimensional stability is also critical. So as we get smaller and smaller, maintaining those tolerances and those dimensions becomes more and more difficult. We'll dig into that a little bit more in the next slides. As well as talked about, sometimes we can simplify the design because complex multi-step manufacturing adds risks. So you get more variation. You're having to move the part to the next stage, which causes risk as well. And we need to make sure that when we're doing some of the builds that are required for the device, then if they have multi-step processes involved, we need to make sure that each one is feeding well into the next one, which means tight coordination between those processes and making sure that everything is compatible as you're making the final product. As Val has touched on, the applications of the devices and the components that we manufacture become more and more complex. They've got requirements from an electrical, a thermal, and mechanical perspective. So we need to take into account what materials we're using. Some hybrid assemblies are using metals, polymers. We have sensors, electronics involved in there as well. And all of this is taking place in a much smaller footprint. So everything is scaling down. The risk that we we have as device manufacturers is that if we leave the design for manufacture too late in the process, then that can mean costly redesigns very late in a program and put launches at risk. So as Val has touched on, the stack up of tolerances, when all of the components come together and then you find that they don't fit as originally intended, then you're trying to re-engineer products as well. And sometimes we do get asked very often to make the impossible. What we will try and do as contract manufacturers, and most people in our market space will do the same, is to help define what geometries are possible to achieve that result. I think we have to remember the association between the geometry of the component that we're making and the performance of that component. So, you know, when we're looking at stiffness, transmission of torque, the resistance to fatigue over the life of the product, we have to make sure that we're taking into account the material properties versus the features that we're putting into the component. So a lot of laser cut tubes that we manufacture, they have complex geometries, complex paths that they have to follow. They're navigating through vessels. They have to be able to deploy, be flexible as they get there, and still have maneuverability when they reach their final destination. There are different ways to achieve that, both from a flexibility and from a mechanical capability point of view. And that's where people such as Oliveris can help in those designs, understanding the function of the device and the component, and understanding that balance between flexibility, pushability, and torsional requirements. So I think understanding the overall picture is important for the manufacturer, but also understanding the limitations of what can be manufactured and what the risks are is important feedback for the device manufacturer. So in a laser cut tube, you can have simple spiral and helical cuts, which give you good flexibility, or you can have ring or slot-based patterns, which give you good axial strength, good pushability, but might be less flexible in their application as well. We can play tunes with kerf widths, which is the width of the laser, which is cutting the feature into the tube. And that kerf width will affect mechanical behavior. You've got local stress raises as a result of laser cutting, which you need to take into account or eliminate in the feature machining. And all of this is driven by cost. Obviously, functionality is only part of the picture. We have to make sure that we're coming up with the optimum solution for manufacturing, which gives us the most economic solution. So all of those factors need to be taken into account when we're coming up with the manufacturing process. We've touched on material strength, and you know, some of this might be stating the obvious, so apologies for that. But as we reduce the scale of components, things like reducing the thickness, if we half the thickness of a component, that's actually quartering the strength of that product. So as we get smaller and smaller, some of the components that are required don't have that physical mechanical strength to satisfy the application. So understanding where that trade-off between structural integrity and capability and feature size, that needs to be considered right at the beginning of the design. Vala again touched on this. All of Oliveris's manufacturing processes are very low contact or zero contact. So lasers and EDM processes don't actually physically touch the product, but even then the process in terms of aspiration with gas jets, with cooling, any vibration, or even the part itself deflecting as it's being machined, as stress relief comes in, that can cause issues in both dimensional drift and the risk of damage as well. So you have to take into account the design of the product, its machinability, and also whether it will move during manufacture as well. again, we've touched on work holding and fixturing. It's very often overlooked in terms of a requirement, because we're not just manufacturing the component, we have to think, how do we hold it until that last moment when it falls away, or we machine the last feature? How do we keep a hold of the part? Because as the machine gets to the end of its process, the part is going to want to fall off. What does that do to the last feature on the product? And the more we can integrate the manufacturing processes into a single setup, so we only hold it once, we'll reduce that risk. If we do have to go through multiple processes, how do we pick it up from process number 1 to then relocate it in process number 2 and down the line as well? So as we often advocate, if we can design either the holding requirement into the component, which can then be removed at the end, or consider how you hold the part when you're designing the product, that's quite an important factor. So just some examples of designing at the microscale. Hopefully you can see some of the dimensions on here, but it's just to give people an idea of the scale of what's possible now, given manufacturing methods and processes that we use and other contract manufacturers are using as well. But fundamentally, design tolerances tend to follow the dimensional. As we get smaller, then people think that the tolerances should fall in proportion to those dimensions, but that's not always physically possible. So we need to be aware of the impractical achievement to, first of all, machine to much tighter tolerances as we reduce the scale of the dimensions, but how do we measure it as well? So those two things need to be taken into account. Sometimes, rather than manufacturing and simplifying the design, it becomes less risk if you look at an assembly of a component. So rather than trying to cut lots and lots of features and creating risk in a single piece component, it might be more advisable to make simpler components which will share the strength requirements of the product and laser weld those together to give the functionality. So again, CDMOs will be able to advise the designer on the best method to achieve that final result. And quite often we haven't all got all of the answers, but hopefully we can help contribute. So trade-offs, very, very important. I think any designer will know that you can't have everything that you want in the design. So functionality, performance, what is the application? That's the critical aspect of any designer. But balancing mechanical performance against manufacturability and application against our ability to measure those components and measure the features that we're putting in there. And what we're all trying to do is have a product that will give the finished results. It can be manufactured, it can be verified as being correct, and gives quality product every time to our customers. So wall thickness, let's all remember, the wall thickness affects the strength, so there's a direct correlation, and stiffness of the product versus the profile that you're cutting into the feature. Thinner walls do improve flexibility, but they reduce strength. Stating the obvious, but we just need to remind people of that. Quite often we get completely mismatched requirements in terms of scale or mechanical design versus the application that's required. Some materials don't exist to achieve some of those requirements. Flexibility, I think, as you look for more flexibility, then you're going to reduce stiffness and torque transmission in a laser cut hypertube. So again, trying to find the trade-off in those requirements is important. We've touched on tight tolerances, so that will inevitably increase cost because you either need a more precise machining system to achieve that tolerance, and also you have to be able to measure and verify that capability as well. So Inspection, again, similar to some of the other things that get overlooked, like holding the part, inspecting the part is critical. We have to be able to measure something to verify that we're delivering good product. And we don't want to throw things away. Surface finish. Quite often parts need to be polished or roughened to give a particular application property. And again, whether we're reducing friction or increasing friction, whether we're trying to create a bonding surface or we're trying to do echogenic finishes so that they can be seen during scanning, we might need to put a surface finish on for biocompatibility. All of those things, again, add secondary operations, and it may have an impact on the original product. So we need to take those things into account as well.
Awesome. Thank you for those insights, Tom. And kind of keeping with that theme of design trade-offs, one of the best tools for navigating the design trade-offs associated with modern medical device development is the ability to rapidly iterate. The faster you can go from concept to physical component, the faster you can refine and validate your design and then move forward in the development process with confidence. By rapidly cycling through the design and refine process, engineering teams have the ability to test fit, form, and function with the goal of uncovering potential design flaws early. And the sooner you're able to identify these potential issues, the less they will end up costing you in both time and money. Using a rapid iteration development approach typically results in compressed development timelines. You're looking at a lower risk profile, and then ultimately you can achieve a higher quality product output. So let's connect the dots here a bit by taking a look at a real world case study where leveraging rapid iteration made a measurable difference. In this instance, our customer, Surgeon Inc., a US-based engineering and development firm focused on early stage medical devices, came to us with a design that looked good on paper, but unfortunately missed the mark from a practicality standpoint. Their original device design used a straight metal tube that frankly met the basic functional requirements, but it just lacked the flexibility needed for efficient manufacturing and then clinical use. We recommended leveraging Elevaris's accelerator program, which is a rapid iteration process developed to help identify potential design flaws and then help optimize the best configuration for the device. By utilizing this process, our engineering team was able to prototype, evaluate, and refine a new design that included a modified cut geometry that not only maintained the lumen and the tube strength specifications, but also improved bend performance, which was ultimately the goal of this exercise. This approach allowed surgeons to de-risk their design early and then move ahead confidently into the next phase of development. So with that, let's wrap things up a bit by taking it back to the big picture and some of the key points we've covered. First, medical devices are changing fast. They're getting smarter, they're getting smaller, and they're doing more than ever before. And that's incredibly exciting. But it also means that the demands on precision components is higher than it's ever been. Second, designing for manufacturability, keeping manufacturability in mind from the start. It isn't just a nice to have, but it can mean the difference between a smooth development cycle and costly delays. Next, we also talked about, Tom touched on how we must balance cut geometry, tolerancing, and material choices. If you get that balance right, you get a component that performs as intended and can be reliably manufactured. And then rapid iteration. I mean, that's your shortcut to de-risking your design and speeding up your development without sacrificing quality. Medical device development will always be complex. There's no way around that. But if you keep these principles and concepts in mind, you can get next generation devices to market faster, more efficiently, and with precision built in from the start. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for your time and attention. That concludes our prepared remarks. And so now we'd like to open the floor for a more open discussion. So if you haven't already done so, please drop your questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Well, fantastic. This was great. I especially like there seemed to be a lot of like useful practical advice and in this presentation. So I guess okay. So we're gonna start taking questions here from the audience. So please, if there's something that you'd like to ask, file these in. I mean, to start out, I mean, what kind of advice would you have to those companies that are involved with new emerging technology? I mean, what kind of advice would you give them about how to get their device to market quickly and effectively?
I'll take this one, Tom. I think on top of some of the points that we covered, keeping manufacturability top of mind, starting manufacturability on day one, rapidly iterating to uncover those potential design flaws. On top of that, I think one of the more practical suggestions would be to leverage strategic partnerships. A lot of times new companies and startups try to go at it alone. But what they find is that to build in-house capabilities requires time and resources. And a lot of times those emerging companies don't have the time and resources to build that in-house. And a lot of times some of those larger strategics don't have the time to focus on those sort of aspects as well. So leveraging strategic partnerships with experts in the various fields can get your device to market faster with less risk and ultimately less cost.
Okay, so conversely, what do what do you see as the most common path to success?
I think the most common path to success is keeping manufacturability top of mind on day one. I think a lot of device developers focus on what's shiny and cool, right? So you want it to be functional and you want it to perform, but they don't necessarily think about that path to market and the manufacturability of the device. You can have an incredibly innovative device that does really cool things, but if you can't build it reliably, then you can't have an impact on patient care or the medical device industry as a whole. So I think keeping manufacturability top of mind is a great suggestion for those starting out and looking to bring devices to market.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that myself of like innovators going to suppliers and with like here they're like, this is a really cool component you're suggesting, but this can't be molded or this can't be machined. So I mean that's really really important advice. And I mean, when you're thinking about this design for manufacturability, what do you commonly see as mistakes? I mean, what should people who are creating medical devices watch out for?
Tom, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they're not necessarily mistakes. I think that would be unfair, but I think sometimes it's oversights and leaving it too late. I know Valer keeps plugging for getting that early collaboration and involvement, but leaving it too late, I think, is a mistake that we see quite often. And then trying to re-engineer a product or a component because of its manufacturability requirements is a bit time consuming and it puts programs at risk. So it might seem that you're putting more work up front if you involve contract manufacturers early or experts in the field early, but it's definitely worth it long term. So I think it's all about the timing of getting that manufacturing ability in as early as possible.
Yeah. Question just came in. Which alloys are you specializing in? I mean, do these include precious metals in their alloys, such as gold or platinum?
Yeah, we predominantly it's stainless steel. That is a requirement in most medical devices. Nitinol, both in tube form and in component form, is obviously becoming more and more of a requirement. But titanium, alloys generally, other more exotic steel materials, precious metals in terms of platinum, iridium, gold, silver components, yes, they're all manufacturable. The good thing about some technologies such as laser and EDM is they don't really care about what the material type is, so that makes them more versatile for those applications.
I mean, what are your thoughts on using tried and tested materials and designs, like compared to exploring newer materials that possibly have some complex challenges in development? I also recall, in the past, like, MedTech has been kind of conservative about materials just because of the regulatory situation.
Yeah. And that's always going to be a factor. I think new materials have new requirements in terms of the regulatory. So that tends to be a barrier, but also availability of those materials quite often in the form that's required to put them through manufacturing. And the manufacturing technologies, as I've said, we have technologies that can be adapted to suit a wide variety of materials, but you still have to work out what the machining parameters are, what the process parameters. So there's a lot of additional development. Whereas using the tried and tested, good old conservative engineers like to work with what they know. So it's a trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think development teams, it's important for them to balance their risk. Going with tried and true materials lessens your risk from a development standpoint. Novel materials can have enhanced performance, but the unknowns associated with those novel materials can add risk to your development process. So I think it's important to consider that up front and balance your risk with the ultimate output.
It's fantastic. And so I love too how, like, I'm hearing so much from you about trade-offs. I mean, that seems to be like a big theme here, and that people need to come to people with expertise such as yourselves who can actually kind of really run them through those trade-offs that we're looking at. I mean, we have another question here, asking what can be a best practice for balancing miniaturization requirements. I love this. We even, obviously, someone with an engineering background, they're saying, for example, less than 0.3 of a millimeter ODs, sub 50 micron walls. They're kind of saying, with the need for mechanical performance, such as torque transmissions, axial stiffness, and fatigue resistance. When you're looking at advanced materials, I mean, what would you say would be the best practices around that?
Well, I think, first of all, miniaturization is often driven by the application of the device. So sometimes the scale of the components of the assembly is driven by the device requirements. So that's always forcing the engineer down an envelope that they have to work within. And I think once the features and the performance of the components are defined, and we've tried to retain the mechanical performance within each of those components, sometimes that will create the need for a different material to then try and change the mechanical properties. Because coming back to the question on standard materials and tried and tested materials, we'd like that to be the answer, but quite often as we scale down, that doesn't give us the answer because we literally haven't got enough material to deliver the performance. So then we have to look at other materials.
Sounds great. And next up, we've got, does Alvarez help with identifying, manufacturability? I mean, that kind of seems like that was your advice, early on. You should really be talking about design for manufacturability, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the true value propositions that Alvarez brings to the table is we position ourselves as a strategic CDMO partner. And a partner is somebody that adds value and brings knowledge and insights to the table. So when the question says, does Elevaris help with identifying manufacturability? And the easy answer is yes. We have extensive expertise in the precision components and development industry. And so taking designs from our customers and reviewing them with our technical teams, and then identifying the best path forward that aligns with the key principles of manufacturability, their targets in terms of time and cost. All of those are the expertise that we can add to your development efforts and help bring that device to market by leveraging our over 30 years of expertise in the space.
That's great. And, this is kind of an interesting question. So what new trends have you noticed with regards to, optimizing efficiencies for precision parts? I mean, what's new? What has you excited?
I think automation is probably the big drive in terms of efficiencies. So quite often manufacturing processes are leading the way with automation. But if you look at some of the challenges we've talked about in this webinar of assemblies and transferring of parts and moving parts and then refixturing and holding those parts, that becomes a bigger challenge for automation. So most of the trend that we are involved in, the technologies are always evolving for the machining part of it, but how do we automate that? Because the biggest variable in a lot of manufacturing, unfortunately, is the person. So if we don't have a person involved and we've got the machine doing all of the work and automating the process as much as possible and transferring the product from one process to the next, then that takes out the risk. That's where the efficiencies of manufacture will come through.
Oh, very good. Well, I think we've run out of the questions coming from the audience. I mean, last call for them, but I mean, oh wait, something just came in here. So do you? Well, yeah, this is actually interesting. I've heard this themes from a lot of suppliers in the space. I mean, this whole trend that we're getting of multiple disciplines under one roof, like being able to be kind of like a one-stop shop. I mean, from your experience, I mean, how has that been helping you be able to deliver for your customers?
Yeah, Elevaris is a purpose-built organization, and so we've structured the company from a vertically integrated perspective. And so a lot of those disciplines we've brought them all under one roof and one brand, this Elevaris brand. So from engineering, process development, manufacturing, all of those resources are in-house. And what that allows us to do is streamline communications. We're able to ensure consistent quality. And then at the end of the day, we're able to scale without the risk that's associated with an overly complex supply chain. So our vertically integrated structure does add value when it comes to device development, when getting devices to market faster and more efficiently and with less cost.
Very good. Well, thanks again. I mean, and I guess maybe we could just wrap up. I mean, just like managing mass device, and we just have just like recent years since the pandemic, it really feels like the innovation of medtech is accelerating right now. I mean, it's such an exciting space, and we're really looking at, I don't know, it just seems like we're going to be able to really help people even more, improve their lives, even save more lives. Anything just and what you're looking forward to with the future. I mean, what are you excited about that's next that you could see your company being able to service more in the medtech space?
Yeah, over the last decade or so, we've been in the midst of this smart device revolution with the Internet of Things emerging and devices being smarter and more connected, leveraging sensors and providing physiological feedback in real time to clinicians. This smart device revolution has been incredibly exciting. But what I'm seeing in front of us is this addition of the super intelligence, right? This artificial intelligence movement is moving at such a rate of speed. I'm really excited about the impact that's going to have in the medical device industry. Devices are going to go to the next level beyond what we've even seen up until this date. And so that's when precision components will play an even more important role, because the importance of the performance of those components will be have even higher and be more critical implications to the overall functionality of some of these new and novel devices. So I'm extremely excited about where technology is headed. I've been really impressed about how devices have evolved, especially over the last decade or so. But I think over the next decade, we're going to see some really amazing evolution of medical devices, and that's going to be exciting to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, really exciting times right now. Well, like one other question that just came in here. Can you expand on the case study you shared a little bit more? I mean, what flaws in manufacturability did you identify, and how did you remedy them?
Tom, are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, no, that particular case study was a very good example of the device developer coming to us in the very early stages. So we didn't necessarily find flaws or concerns in manufacturability. It was probably helping understand the application and the mechanical performance requirements of that particular component that the customer was looking for, and then coming up with a manufacturing method that would deliver that result. So it meant within 2 or 3 iterations, as Vala highlighted, you can get to a design that performs exactly as they want when they started off with no design at all. So I think that was a different one. Other cases where we've done supported development activity, there'll be an existing design that looks to be modified, and then you can see that manufacturing hasn't been taken into account at the early stage, and you're having to go back 2 steps before you then start to develop the product. So we get a mixture of applications.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, again, thank you to everyone here for listening here. I just say, please take a moment to complete our survey. This webinar will be available on our website on demand. And again, really, really appreciate you two coming on here today. Some, as I said, some really, really useful advice for people. A lot of really good points about the trade-offs, as you look at creating components for all these next-gen surgical systems. So appreciate it. Look forward to doing another one with you in the future.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay. Absolutely.